Hello and welcome to episode 287 of the THERSday Night Podcast. My name is Brady, joined as always by David. And look, Georgia State's men's basketball is officially on a tear. They go 2-0 this past week. They've won 8 of their last 10 games. But something has to have happened to shift that to not the first thing on the running order to speak of. And we've got semi-breaking news. I guess we knew it was coming because Ted Hurst had been invited to the Senior Bowl, but I think we need to move up the Ted Hurst conversation and put it in greater emphasis on the podcast. And just, if you are a Georgia State follower, like, you got to start keeping better tabs on it because, like, the guy has made his impact in the NFL draft conversation. He's there in Mobile. Kind of the one thing you can do Senior Bowl week is just kind of have a viral moment where people kind of stick their head up, and Ted Hurst has had that. And he's there competing. I think he's on Team American. And I'll pull up the clip as David has his spiel he wants to say on that as we're starting this podcast with football late January, because it feels very likely Georgia State will have their best ever draft pick by maybe several rounds worth.
Several rounds.
When Ted's name is called later in April.
What's encouraging to me is even I feel like I've seen some national guys who, like, it's one thing if, like, the draft sickos like us start talking about, like, okay, here's a G5 prospect, here's this guy who didn't play against, SEC competition or whatever. It's one thing if people like that are talking about a Ted Hurst. It's always funny when I see people like, oh, this guy is a secret this Senior Bowl, and it's like, well, I pay attention to the G5, and I have at least seen some of this guy's work. And I don't mean that about Ted specifically. But, like, I'm seeing national people talk about Ted Hurst. Like, the clip that you're about to pull up, if it's the catch that I think it is, which I'm sure it is, like, people are noticing Ted Hurst in a way that nobody has noticed, Georgia State. And it's funny to say this because whether you knew it or not, a former Georgia State football player had a semi-viral moment this past Sunday, but that just goes to show how much more it would mean for Georgia State if Ted Hurst gets called when you and I think he gets called and performs how you and I think that he can, because, like, Ted Hurst is looking real serious, and you and I saw it all year this year. We saw it last year. Like, Ted Hurst is looking real good.
Yeah, marrying all of what you were just talking about there, the clip I'm pulling, multiple people posted, including people on location putting up their video from the stands of the moment, but I pulled this one up for a specific reason that you're talking about national people noticing. Doesn't get much more national than Dan Brugler at The Athletic, who is one of the big NFL draft guys. He posted the clip there. I'll get it running now so everyone can see it if you have missed this moment. He's up against Julian Neal, Arkansas cornerback. One arms it, brings it down, lands on the player, brings it in. And Dane Brugler's got all the numbers here as well. Both angles on the video. Ted measured 6'3", 207 at the Senior Bowl, which great numbers for him. And the rest of what Dane goes on to say, glides to top speed and creates catching windows. Really productive for a team that went 1-11 in 2025. And then the stat that I didn't know, I hadn't seen this yet, 34 catches at 20-plus yards over the last 2 seasons. That is number 1 in FBS. And so kind of putting all of those points together in one, this is like, this guy is getting noticed by the people he needs to get noticed to get picked in a good spot in the draft. And look, the journey is certainly nowhere near over. This week isn't even over, and the Senior Bowl itself is to come after the week of practices. 48 receivers got invited to the Combine in 2025. Yeah, Georgia State has had players go to the Combine who did not go to the Senior Bowl. So even before this happened, it would have been pretty easy to assume he was going to get invited just because his name had been out there some. I feel like it's even more comfortable to kind of look at that as a pretty near certainty. And then he's also got his pro day possibility, which with the chance to go to the Combine, sometimes guys just go to the Combine. They don't do a pro day. I don't know what Ted is going to do handling that, but still a long journey to go. And he has got stuff to overcome as far as, like, whether it's fair or not, people look at, like, where you came from as a label, and they want to see how you perform against the top of college before you're performing against the top of the NFL week after week. And so having something like that where against an SEC cornerback he has a moment, like that's kind of the biggest thing he could do for his game. And my unofficial kind of thing I'm looking at, as I agree with you that like he's getting noticed more than any NFL draft Georgia State prospect has happened before, which is to say those were good players, they just didn't get the national attention, and no one's gotten picked later or earlier than the 6th round. I saw a fan mock-up of Ted Hurst in a Ravens uniform, so I'm assuming a Ravens fan, and that kind of speaks to where everything's at with, like, you talked about the sickos earlier, like the sickos are noticing and using Photoshop, and I don't think that's the first time I've seen a Georgia State player mocked up in a team's jersey.
Honestly, that's great though. Like I know that Georgia State has such a long way to go when it comes to stuff like this, but imagine what it would look like if Ted Hurst does legitimately go day 2, like early day 2, has a great camp, like easily is, he'll be a rookie, so not a wide receiver 1 wherever he goes, but, just a solid guy, get some special teams, gunner reps or whatever, and then just, October, regardless of whatever Georgia State is doing, he is showcasing that he can be a talented wide receiver in a way like we've seen other talented Georgia State wide receivers. And the thing that matters so much is Ted stayed, he stayed and he was still productive. So I really hope that he is able to, have a good pro day if he does have one, or just continue to have his draft stock rise.
Yeah. And I mean, He talked about this. This is a quote I got, I guess, someone on site, Ross McCorkle, who writes for Steelers Depot, presumably covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he spoke one-on-one, seems after, or in a gaggle, whatever the case may be. I'm not in Mobile to confirm how this happened, but gave some quotes. And one of them was just like the most baller wide receiver quote, which was that he said, "I feel like when the ball is 50-50, it's mine." That's like the good, like the... What is it? The not chaotic evil, or not chaotic good. Yeah. Wide receiver quote, and not like the meme about like posting.
Oh, where it's something to the effect of like, my enemy travels behind me and has a knife or something.
Yeah, not the chaotic evil quote like that. The chaotic good, where it's just like, I think I'm good and I'm going to win 50-50 balls. But then beyond that, he spoke to what you were just talking about, where he said, because he got the question, because his name popped up in the whole transfer conversation last year of kind of like, why do you stay? And the quote from Ted Hurst was, "Being surrounded by great people who have the best interest in me, them telling me what I need to hear more so than the what ifs and the what ands of maybe this might happen if you leave. You already made a name for yourself at Georgia State, so why not be a shark in a pond?" And there are plenty of things that we have detailed on this podcast that did not go right for Georgia State in 2025 on the football field. But the one bet that got made by Ted Hurst, by Del McGee, by receivers coach Damian Craig was bringing this guy back is going to help him get where he wants to go, and it's going to help us be a better team, and it's going to put Georgia State on a better map and get attention for what he can do in the league if he gets drafted. And that bet paid off. And it's not the most important thing, because obviously team went 1-11 this year. Fans would have rather the team go 11-1 and have no one going on day 2 of the NFL draft. But you got to take your victories where they come, and you hope that if Del McGee builds on it this year, gets in the right direction, and has more players who get some interest from power conference level, that he can sell them the Ted Hurst story that, yes, you can go get some money somewhere, you can go somewhere, and you can still get drafted. It's not like it's going to lessen your chances to get drafted, but Ted showed guys that you can do it here, and he might be doing it in a way that is like emphatically different than anyone else who's made the NFL before from Georgia State.
And that's important. Like I know that, it's rich that I myself am talking about this. I know that, coaches can get fired and then you can have a complete turnaround in 1 year, in both college and at the NFL level. So it's nice that you can still showcase guys like, hey, look, you can be a good player. We've got NIL right now. We've got, with the way that players are being compensated for their production, you can be a guy who is like very clearly a draft prospect and still stay at a Georgia State. Obviously it would be better if you're not 1-11, but the more guys who still recognize like, wait, I can still be drafted from this school, regardless of the coach. Let's say that they're just, Metro Atlanta kids and they don't necessarily care to leave the state, but they don't want to go to a UGA. They don't want to go to a Georgia Tech. They don't want to go to a Kennesaw, Georgia Southern or something like that. You can still... Ted having a good day here could showcase that Georgia State is still a place where, regardless of the coach, you can still be a player on the team and still grow just as easily as, getting transfers from other schools, whether or not the player is from Georgia or not.
So more to track from that. Obviously, mentioned the Senior Bowls later this week, and gonna have my attention full up of just like who is watching Ted Hurst, who is mocking him where, and obviously don't want him to go to want him to get drafted. Don't want him to go to anywhere else in the NFC South other than Atlanta. But the thing of it is, Drake London, great receiver. He might literally be the only receiver under contract heading into next season at this point for the Atlanta Falcons. And so guy like Ted, who's a deep threat, kind of pairs well with what Drake London does over the middle of the field. There's kind of a fit there, but they might have to choose him with their first pick. The hype reaches a certain point, and so I'm interested to see where it mellows out after this immediate moment, because you've got people talking about like he's in their top 50, and I don't think that's going to necessarily pan out. But
that's a bit of a stretch.
But I have seen more than a few people saying top 100, and so
I buy that.
I want to see where that lands after kind of the high of that viral moment that went out on everyone saw the Senior Bowl, and see where things sit in the next couple weeks as more of the news comes out of the combine stuff and people's pro days. And then I think especially, and this is something that they track at the Senior Bowl, he was 5th on the chart of the day of overall speed. He got clocked at 20.33 miles per hour. I'm assuming on that play that we saw the clip of, but maybe not. His speed test is also going to be a really important factor in this. If he goes to the combine, if he tests, what his 40 time is, could be a big determiner in how big the hype gets and where he ends up landing. Because if that 40 time is good, maybe he lands in the second round, and it's a crazy just kind of journey that lands in a major spot. But I think safely getting drafted, hearing your name attached to top 100 makes you feel pretty good about where you might end up landing. And so it'll be interesting to see where it ends up when this week ends and just everyone's takeaways, and as they look at the whole receiver class as a whole, where he ends up stacking. And probably worth getting like an aggregate of where people are putting him in their ratings, just because I think he's going to start showing up in a lot of these people's long lists at this point, no matter what. Just that is the impact of what this week has done, if nothing else.
Yeah, and I know that we are both surprised at the top 50 grade there, but now that I think about it, didn't Mike Green come into the Senior Bowl last year with a good season out of Marshall, and then ended up just skyrocketing ridiculously? So I mean, it wouldn't be totally out of the realm of possibility.
Especially now that there's so much transferring going on, there is a bit of a light touch with guys from G5, and there's another guy I think from John Carroll University, the receiver, whose name escapes me right now, who is there, and they're like similar vibes from the combine people or the Senior Bowl people on him, as far as like he is showing up in a way that you need to as a lower level guy. I think you're graded on an even steeper curve now, because there are guys who have made that jump already, who spent a year or two in a power conference program after being at a G5, G6, whatever you want to call it. And so now the guys that are staying there, they're almost even more careful to anoint someone, because it's what these evaluators value, is kind of like what you looked against the best teams you played and playing the best teams week after week, because it's going to emulate as best as possible, which is not very possible because there's a huge jump to the NFL, what you look like against the best competition. And so having these moments, like I said, getting a bit circular talking about this, but really wanted to hit this off the jump, because very significant to Georgia State football if they're able to have anything like, a top 3-4 round draft pick and kind of reset the record there. And obviously it's great for Ted and his future. What he's able to do at Georgia State set him on this path, and what he's gone since the end of the season and going through the work, he's put the work in, and that's showing up. One other football note I'm throwing in here, just because this has kind of come across the last week or so. It's been probably a bit of more of a bittersweet thing for Georgia State fans, but our pal Ben Moore, Panther Talk publisher, had the news from sources. Dan Ellington likely to be named, or is set to be named, the receivers coach at Kennesaw State. So he will be on the sidelines for that game, just not in the same spot as what maybe people are hoping. But I wanted to include it because it's always nice to keep tabs on the alums and what they're doing. There's a couple of them that have like Antro Allen went to West Georgia, is now at Mercer with the coach who went from West Georgia to Mercer, Joel Taylor, and so. But Dan's an obvious one because he was on the staff here, and I just like seeing that he landed on his feet and he's back with an FBS program. Just spent a year as a analyst, an off-field guy on Illinois staff, and it seems like a really good year of development for him under Brett Bielema and that offensive staff. And now he lands on his feet after 2 years away from FBS, working on Jerry Mack's staff there at Kennesaw.
I'm not going to say that the rise will mirror it exactly, but from all of the times that I annoy you with the bit, how much that I've kept tabs personally on Jesse Minter. And I would love
new Ravens head football coach.
Exactly. And that's a great hire. I would love nothing more than a couple years from now, college or the pros, we just start to see more and more, hey, Dan Ellington, this guy, he was the offensive coordinator for this top 5 offense or whatever, just get more and more buzz as he just kind of works his way around the circuit. Because one of my favorite things to do whenever I see coaches, like just older coaches, 50s, 60s, 70s, is to see where they were in their first couple of stops, and now that obviously we are older, so we can kind of follow this a little bit easier. It's just always nice to see where guys kind of pick up these different things from, who worked on what staff, and kind of what coaching tree could you technically be under. So wish Dan the best. Obviously I hope that he has a horrible performance. I hope that his wide receivers drop every pass and fumble 17 times, score 0 touchdowns, run the wrong route. Honestly, just run the wrong way the entire game. And then the rest of the games, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, and the other thing that you kind of mentioned, offensive coordinator, you always wonder with guys that start as quarterbacks, just because I feel like there's a natural progression there. It just always feels like quarterbacks get the buzz for stuff like play calling. If you look at his career, he hasn't been in coaching that long, obviously, he takes over immediately after being done as a player on Georgia State staff as an offensive assistant. He's coached every position group except quarterback and offensive line since starting his short career, and he played quarterback, so you kind of figure he doesn't need that much hands-on experience doing the coaching side of that stuff. He has built himself a nice little versatile offensive resume, if that is something he wants in the future. And he spent a year, he was at his junior college in Awamba, and he was the OC there in the year in between Georgia State and Illinois, and so it is certainly something I'm interested in where that kind of progresses, because he is kind of getting those little resume points you need to just get a full understanding of every part of the offense, of what you need to be the best possible coordinator you can be, if that is something you want down the road. And so, whether we're talking about this 1 or 2, 3 coaching changes from now, or Georgia State needs someone who's been a play caller before, it would be a fun end of the story if it ends up where Dan Ellington ends up on the sideline with the headset. Maybe he's up in the booth. He could be up in the booth, but rhetorical, he's there calling plays for Georgia State again. That just might be a fun little coda to his Georgia State career.
As long as the reason the outgoing offensive coordinator is being promoted because Georgia State won, 16-0 or whatever Indiana did, I'm cool with it. Let's bring Dan back. Let's let him call plays.
But yeah, best of luck to Dan at Kennesaw, and congrats on getting the job there. Gonna move to basketball at this point. The women's team, Crystal Henderson, did it again. They're seriously in trouble in Mobile. They're down 25-7 at the end of the first quarter, but no deal, no problem. They fight their way back into the game, and then in the final moments of regulation, she works her way to the hoop, gets a layup to fall with 2 seconds left, sends the game to overtime, tied at 70, and in the extra period, as they did against James Madison. Panthers win 78-75, outscore the Jaguars 8-5 in the extra period. Despite not scoring the final just under 3 minutes of the game, able to get the job done there. Crystal Henderson, 22 points, including the heroics at the end of regulation. Kaylee Addy, 18 points there, 3 of 6 from 3. South Alabama was not having a great season, and this would not have been a great loss, especially you felt like the James Madison win had given them a bit of life, and so it would have been a real kind of downer to follow that up with a loss here. But you're able to pull it out, able to lean on what you do best. You're forcing 24 turnovers to committing only 13 of your own. They follow that out on Saturday with a game probably doesn't bear as much talking about. They lose 96-69 in a palindrome game at Troy. But then Troy's a good team. I think the 1-1 split here ultimately is not as best as you could hope for because you can just win 2 basketball games. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it is a reasonable outcome. And so all the better that they were able to pull this one out in Mobile in the midweek.
Yeah, I think the thing that you want to take away from the Troy loss is mostly just the same issues that we've seen. I need you to pull up the Troy box score just because it is so bad. But while you do that, I will just say, like, the South Alabama game is... You really do hope that can lead them to kind of stabilizing where they are. They've been so wishy-washy of late. And, this Troy game juxtaposed to that South Alabama game is just further proof of that. I wanted you to pull this up now just because, does that say 63 rebounds allowed to 26 received? Like that is...
Yeah, I think we didn't think it was going to be worse than the Miami game earlier in the year, and it has.
Yeah.
That's... This is who this team is kind of magnified in a very large degree, and the other part of that is that you got outshot 50% to 35%, so you were leaving a lot of rebounding opportunities up there for Troy to grab, and they got 38 of them on defense, but they got 25 offensive glass as well. So weird that the shots were basically even, and I think that speaks to the fact that even in a heavy defeat, Georgia State did force 20 Troy turnovers in this one. So averaging over 20 turnovers forced as a defense this week, but didn't get enough stops and didn't get enough makes on Saturday against Troy to pull that one out.
And that's the frustrating part, because you can tell that there's still good basketball here, but then they'll have games like this where somebody else will just shoot the lights out. And like you said, Troy's a good team. I'm not actually upset about it, but it's just you cannot get out-rebounded 63 to 26 because they also got out-rebounded versus South Alabama, but that was 44 to 38. Like, that is a completely different level of out-rebounding and turning your extra possessions into opportunities. So,
yeah, and Troy with the win proves to 7-2 in the league, 16-4 overall, which is the second best overall winning percentage of teams in the league. The team with the best winning percentage and the team who's number one in the standings as well with a 9-1 conference record so far is Georgia State's next opponent, Arkansas State, who they will play Thursday at 11 a.m. Then they will also host Texas State Saturday at 2 p.m. This is kind of a similar situation where it's like, Arkansas State's a really good team, and you're playing them at home, and you just beat James Madison at home, so maybe that gives you some hope, and we'll get to it in a little bit. You also just beat the Arkansas State men's team at home, so maybe there's just some good juju working there in that matchup. But that feels like the reach of this week, home court advantage aside. That's a very good team. Made the tournament last year and seems well on their way to contending to repeat and not do it in kind of a you make a run in Pensacola deal, but be like the best team in the league type thing the Red Wolves have got going. Texas State, around you in the standings, Texas State is 9-10 overall, one game above. They're at 5-4. They are alone in 6th place with that 5-4 record. Georgia State's at 9-12 now, and they're 4-5 in the league after this week. There's still a lot of basketball to be played, but this could be a seed tiebreak type game for them when the season's over in March. Like, if they get this one or don't get this one against Texas State, that could be the difference on where they sit in the final standings and in the seeds for the tournament in Pensacola. And so not only do you not want to go 0 for this week and drop to 9-14, kind of get back out of the momentum you had started to build there with the little 2-game streak, it could be the difference between you're playing this day or you're playing that day. And so just the way everything shakes out, with this feeling like a pretty tight middle where there's a lot of teams kind of around the same in the record and in the talent level, feels like an important one to get at home against the Bobcats from San Marcos.
It is, because the schedule, I mean, we talked about on the men's side how the schedule kind of lines up for them to be relatively successful down the stretch here. The women don't share that same luxury. They just was on the road against Troy. The next game, like you said, is Arkansas State. They have a couple of games after this against teams that are quote unquote below them in the standings. But they also have games against teams who are above them. And it's, kind of a mixed bag outside of Arkansas State. It's not anybody at the tip top of the league, but Marshall's they got the entire season series against Marshall, and Marshall's 2 back of Arkansas State, and they have only 1 overall loss fewer than Arkansas State. So this is not necessarily going to be just the easiest, down the stretch. So you got to take advantage of the Texas States on your schedule if you are going to try to improve your seeding and not, continue to fall back in the standings.
Important week, especially the opportunity on Saturday, that could lead to it. And if they are able to pull it off against Arkansas State, which only one team in the league has done so far as we are at the halfway point of the season, obviously would be a major win and certainly would have them pointing further in the right direction.
And the team was Troy.
Yeah, it's a team that, if you got the common points thing going there. So team you just lost to by 27, beat them. So it will be a heavy lift, but speaks nothing to them if they're not able to get the job done, because lots of teams are losing to the Red Wolves right now. It's a good basketball team right now. Another good basketball team right now is the Georgia State men's Panthers. A conversation I don't think we were prepared to have when the team started out 1-9, and it was kind of like there are things that we should just say we will come back to. There's still a longer conversation to be had about the team being in this position where they were basically left for dead before the conference season even started. But the thing of it is, they kept playing games, and the team kept playing. And at this point, they have won 8 of the last 10. They have won 4 straight Sun Belt games for the first time in Jonas Hayes' 4 years as Georgia State's head coach. They went 2-0 this past week, 69-62 win over Southern Miss on Thursday, and then a down-to-the-wire 82-81, I would say upset, at home against Arkansas State, to improve now to 9-12, 6-3, alone in second place, halfway through the conference schedule. And so we're really just going to focus on the here and now, which is that Georgia State is playing meaningful basketball games heading into the month of February. And there's still stuff to get worked out. There's still games to be played, and they don't have that much of a safe kind of like, there's a lot of teams there at 5-3 and 6-4 and 5-4 right behind them. So lose a couple and you'll be right back in the middle of the pack. But they're in as good a position as they've been under Hayes to getting a top 4 seed in the Sun Belt tournament, which is really important now because of the change that they made, that if they're in the top 4, they're not playing until Saturday. They're only going to play 2 games to get to the title game. And so it's as advantageous as it's ever been in this league, as they have gone back to favoring the regular season to finish as good as you can in the standings. And we haven't been able to earnestly have that conversation about this team since Jonas Hayes got here until right now at this very moment.
And I think it's fascinating to me because they are genuinely starting to look serious. I'm not going to say serious as in this is going to be the 1 seed in the Sun Belt tournament, like going to make a run, go to the NCAA tournament serious, but serious in the sense that I think, I can't speak for you specifically, but I think after that second Marshall game, they had started to play a little bit better, and they had only lost to App State. Poor play at the end of the game, a grinded out type game. So and
a team they had beaten before. So exactly. It's like it balances out, and it wasn't a blowout. And
I think it was around. I don't want to go past the Southern Miss game, but I'll say this point because it was in the Arkansas State game. Georgia State goes down pretty big early. It was 20-5 at one point. And, that to me, I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, Arkansas State, what did we talk about last week? They love pace. They're scoring a lot, good team in the Sun Belt right now. So this isn't a total surprise. Georgia State has struggled with teams with pace. And then Georgia State just kind of kept chipping away at it. They completely flipped the defensive script. They started to hit some of their shots that they really weren't hitting early on in the game. It was a very fun game between Jelani Hamilton and just Arkansas State in general. I think at the time Harmon was shooting lights out from three.
And he ends up their top scorer, 23, 6 of 10 from 3.
Exactly. And I think they put a graphic that Christian Harmon had 10 points was his high before that game, in an individual game, something like that. So it was a surprise that he was shooting as well as he was. But Georgia State just found a way, and that's the thing that has started to really kind of change this thing for me, because when they took that lead going into halftime, one, they had extended it to, I think, about 5. But 2, you really started to see something that I don't think you and I have seen under Coach Hayes, which is that they absorbed a big blow, and then they went and responded with a run of their own, number one. And number 2, they were able to kind of change how their defense worked, because Arkansas State was really sloppy. Yes, they scored 81 points. Yes, they almost had 50% from the floor. They shot their free throws extremely well. Still had 14 turnovers. And a lot of them weren't Georgia State is not anywhere near, and a guy just dribbles it off his foot. Georgia State was, getting in those passing lanes and, forcing some of the action to specifically, have somebody on the back end turn over the ball. I don't know, man. Georgia State they just look so serious right now. And it's scary, because if you go back to, I don't even know a great cutoff point here, but go back to the Georgia Southern game. 90 to 67 loss. If you and I sat here and said Georgia State is going to be second in the Sun Belt by the end of January, well, there's 2 games left in January, but almost at the end of January, I think you and I would have laughed at each other.
Yeah, it's so how many teams just decided to stop playing for some reason?
Exactly.
Is there a secession crisis and there's only 2 teams left in the Sun Belt? What's going on? It's been an amazing turnaround, and in this game, and as the philosopher Rustin Cole said, time is a flat circle. So we can start with the Arkansas State game. It certainly is it was the entertaining game of the week. So we can go backwards and start with the game that happened on Saturday. I think it was literally, and this is something that Jonas has even voiced in the post game, they just couldn't replicate Arkansas State's tempo, and so early they were just getting blitzed. They're down 20-5. Arkansas State couldn't miss to start the game. And they adjusted, they caught up to the speed, and I think Arkansas State's tempo ended up working against them, or Georgia State made it work against them, because I think the 14 turnovers you speak to, they caught them in moments where they were going too fast. And early in the game, Panthers were getting killed by that. Their too fast was not in the vocabulary for Arkansas State, because Georgia State wasn't ready for the speed at which they were going to play at. But then as Georgia State got into it, it started to work against them, and they're having some turnovers where it's kind of there was ball pressure, and Georgia State was just forcing steals because the guy was just dribbling right where a guy was. And Jelani Hamilton's forcing steals, and there's some fast break opportunities. And you look at it on the other side, I can't believe we've buried the lead this long. I mean, you talk about Georgia State looks like a serious team. Jelani Hamilton looks like a serious player. He is now, by more than a point, the top scorer in the Sun Belt, and he counts for the statistics now, so he's up there 19.4 points a game. Scored a career-high 38 in this one. It's the most in a game since DeMarcus Simon scored 39 against ULM back in 2018. And that is the person who's most nearly scored 38 for Georgia State, so wanted to shout out that statistic, but it was very R.J. Hunter-esque for me. And that is praise you do not want to throw that out lightly, because those are big shoes. But
The thing though, and I hear you, and those are big shoes. But if you go back and watch, because he had that one spot from the, I don't even know how to describe it, but from the right side of the basket, if you will, he had that one spot where he was like, it was beyond the arc, and he was just like, okay, this is the spot that I'm just gonna not miss from tonight. And later on in the game, when he needed another clutch three, he went to the other side, and I was like, I don't know about that, and he was incredible. We have not seen a performance like that since DeMarcus Simons was here. And I think the most impressive part about it to me was, it wasn't just Hamilton. Obviously, he was incredible. I'm not going to sit here and say that he wasn't. In the first half specifically, there were times where it was like, okay, maybe he is going to miss, maybe he's not going to actually be, LOL, he's not going to turn this into a supernova game, only 15 points. But then that was when you had Chappelle giving you something, Micah Tucker dropping in, doing different things, Malachi Brown, having his 2 points in the first half. So it was weird because we had not seen a Georgia State team play like a team while somebody was going off this much. And they actually did that,
Yeah, I mean, Micah Tucker, 5 assists, Malachi Brown, 5 assists, they didn't have, they combined 16 points between them, but not very good, not a very efficient. Micah makes 2 of 5 from 3. That's pretty good, but 3 of 9 shooting overall, only 10 points. Malachi, 6 points, 1 of 4 shooting. You needed, with those percentages, for Jelani to do what he did, but it was also that they were being good distributors, even though their shots weren't falling. And at a certain point, it felt like everyone just collectively understood that just get the ball to 10. He's going to make something happen. And the reason I compare him to RJ is there were just games like this where it's you just could tell he's the one, even on those teams that had Ryan Harrow, that had Devontae White, very good players. It was kind of just give the ball to RJ. It was just give the ball to Jelani. He's going to be able to create his own threes. And the percentages, the number of threes he made just felt very like RJ. And you look at it, 12 of 21, 6 of 11 from 3, 8 of 10 from the free throw line. Heading into this week, he had taken the lead in the Sun Belt standings and scoring, and it just felt like an even greater arrival to go out there, and he scored 38 in this one. He averaged 30.5 in the 2 games. It will surprise exactly no one. He was named Sun Belt Player of the Week.
Wow,
usually if you
shocker.
score over 30 points a game over 2 games, hard to beat that. And, he's worked his way into the first team Sun Belt conversation. Player of the year is not completely out of realm of possibility, especially if the team keeps winning. And I think we always knew that there was potential for this. And it's been kind of slow developing, and now it is no longer slow. It's wake up, you got to see this, because not only is it just the scoring overall, he's number 1 in free throw percentage, 92.2%. If he does not lose, I think he has 3% of safety net to set the school record. I think RJ is somewhere in the 88% is the record. I tweeted it out on Saturday, and don't have it pulled up in front of me, but record-breaking free throws possibility, and that certainly leads the league. He's also first in steals, a little over 2 a game, which is something that has snuck up on me as how productive he had been with the steals, the defensive numbers, and he just was the best player in the second half. And even though Arkansas State outscored Georgia State 45-44 in the second half, he was the one that was making the plays happen. And look, they got a little bit lucky. It's an 82-81 game, final couple seconds. They had been making their free throws, as they are wont to do. They needed one more inbound and to send someone to the line to cinch the game away. And they turned it over on the inbounds. And Arkansas State got as good of a look as you could hope for kind of scramble play as the clock is expiring. But Jalen Hampton's 3 heave misses everything, and you can breathe a sigh of relief. And it really isn't the cliche of it isn't a cliche. It is reality of you'd rather be lucky than good, and you need those moments. And I would at least say that they have played themselves into those type of situations and earning that bounce to go their way, which had not been the case for the first part of the year. But now it's to the point where it's if the game did come down to that moment where you just you needed a guy to miss a semi-open three as the time is expiring in the game, you'd earned the benefit of the doubt, which maybe this team hadn't done all season to this point, but they certainly have over the last 10 games. And so they'd earned a late game thing to go their way in this one. And I'm glad you mentioned Joe Chappelle also. He scored 10 points in the first half. They probably aren't in the game without what he did off the bench. He comes in, hits 2 threes, hits another shot as well, hits a couple free throws. Like, Jelani had not shown up to that point in the game. The offense was really, even as they had started to get some more misses from Arkansas State, they were still looking for some kind of juice there in the middle portion of the first half. And Joa brought it off the bench in a really important way that felt significant to them having a chance to come back, take the lead at halftime, and let the rest go from there and let Jelani go supernova.
Yeah, I cannot stress enough how much I was encouraged by the team aspect of that, that first half. I really think that they, that was the first time I think we've seen from a, Coach Hayes team what the vision could look like when everybody is on. And I mean, even then there were still things to improve. Like if Joe Chappelle and Ja'Kai Newton didn't, play as they did in that, I guess middle stretch of the first half, Georgia State doesn't win this game. They don't come back in this game at all.
And, they're able to, and I guess we usually go forward, so I'm working on transition live here. It's kind of like, let's go back in time a little bit. Kind of the opposite type of game entirely, but I don't think that's a bad thing as they beat Southern Miss 69-62 on Thursday night. Just kind of call it what it was. Bit of a slop fest. Neither team brought their offense in much of a way, except that in the second half, Georgia State's 19 of 25 from the free throw line. And so, once again, superior free throw shooting pays off for them in this one as they're able to pull it out. They trailed by 2 at the break. They were down 32-30 to the Golden Eagles. And frankly, it was an earned lead for Southern Miss at the break because as we're talking about what Georgia State was able to do on Saturday with kind of getting Arkansas State to commit some turnovers and just kind of not stay in their offensive flow, that was what Southern Miss was doing to Georgia State on Thursday, where they have 11 first-half turnovers, and it was just simply guys were in the grill of Georgia State players, and they were not handling just the on-ball pressure well. There was a stretch where Ja'Kai Newton came in, had 4 turnovers in 3 minutes, which is not great. And it was, frankly, he was getting stuck in ball handling situations and bringing it up against pressure in the half court. That isn't really what you have him on the court for. And so I think there was an understanding at that point of don't have him in that role, get him off the court. And I'm glad he had the moments on Saturday to kind of recover from that. But it was also Micah Tucker with 6 turnovers, a couple of times where maybe it was encouragement, but certainly Jonas Hayes was shouting and seemed frustrated and was yelling things in Micah's direction as far as wake up and just kind of not handling that well. But the defense for Georgia State, especially in the second half, came to match that. They got it cleaned up with the turnovers, and I think that alone made a big difference in the game in the second half as they're able to outscore Southern Miss by 9 and win the game. So not a lot to write home about with anything with the offensive part of the game, except that they cleaned up the thing that had been killing them in the first half, and they made their free throws, and they out-rebounded Southern Miss, who's a good rebounding team, by 15. And so that ended up mattering a lot in a game that was decided on the margins.
And that was the one thing that we highlighted almost immediately about that Southern Miss team. So, a win is a win, and they're playing a lot better. So, we can give them the benefit of the doubt when you have a slop fest game like this. Obviously, you don't want to have a half where you commit as many turnovers as Georgia State did. But, they're right now we're in the finding ways type phase. And that's good. That's how good teams do it sometimes. So hopefully they can keep that up.
Yeah, and I was looking up these numbers on Saturday as I was at the Arkansas State game, which I'm honestly, this is another weather aside, I'm glad everyone prepared and everyone was ready and the city seemed ready, and it ended up being a lot better than expected, and I was able to go on Saturday, and it's better to be in the situation where you over-prepare because there's no downside, whereas we lived the downside of not being ready for a huge snowstorm back in 2014. And so, good job everyone involved. But I was sitting there at the game in the Convocation Center. I was just kind of like, these first halves are an issue, and obviously they came back in both these games, despite trailing. They were down by 11 to Southern Miss in the first half. They obviously, as we talked about, were down by 15 to Arkansas State. And it is leveled out to where, in this stretch, starting with the Jacksonville State game back in December, they're actually even in scoring margin in first halves, and they're +8 in the second half. And so when I started the exercise, that removes the non-D1, because those numbers obviously were pretty favorable in both directions. But against Division I teams, they're exactly even in first halves in the last 10 games, and they're +8 in the second half, which speaks to, one, how many close games they've been playing, but also that they have been better in the second half. Maybe it was not as bad as I feared, but you got away with being down by double digits both times in these games in the first half, and you were at home. You go on the road this week, go to Louisiana. On Thursday, you go to South Alabama on Saturday, and you have 4 of your next 6, including those 2, are on the road. You can't keep having these first halves where especially the offense is slow to be there. You have some lapses defensively, and you're down double digits, because that is the one thing about this that is not sustainable. These were 2 really good wins, but you can't keep finding yourself down double digits all the time and expect to come back, because at a certain point it becomes too much. And so it's like, on one hand, you congratulate them for finding a way, and certainly these were 2 well-earned, deserved, good wins. But that is the part of it that, even starting this week, even against a team like Louisiana, who, while they were in conversation with Georgia State, like near the bottom of the Sun Belt right now, Georgia State has raised the level of where they were at the start of the year, the start of the conference season. And so this starts to feel like more of a game, like with Louisiana being 5-16, 3-6 in the league, also not a great offensive team. This tilts in their favor, where it feels like it's going to be a disappointment if they don't get this win.
Not only that, it'll be a disappointment if they don't get the win and look good. You know, I don't mean that they need to blow them out by like 20 or something like that, but are they going to start slow? Are they going to let Louisiana use pace to kind of blitz them in the beginning of the game? Or is Georgia State going to be turning the ball over, you know, a ton of times in ways that it doesn't make sense for them to do? So you're absolutely right. Like, this is a game where, you know, you can really start to show like, how serious are you, you know, because the one thing that we can say that Georgia State needs to continue to do is, like, yeah, they have the Coastal game, you know, yeah, they have the ULM game. They've got to continue to, if they're going to really, you know, showcase the seriousness, they got to keep blowing people out that are, you know, that far in the standings from them. They absolutely have to do that, you know, and I don't think that ULM, I'm not going to say that that wasn't a good win, because of course it was, you know, but Coastal has risen in the standings, so we can, you know, kind of ask, like, has Coastal just been better since they played? Probably, you know, so they're going to have to keep, you know, finding ways to do well against the teams that are below that, like this far below them in the standings, because like you said at the beginning, the standings are still very jumbled. I mean, Georgia Southern, it looks like they're about like little under halfway in the rankings. They're just 1-1, you know, 1 fewer win, 1 more loss than Georgia State right now. So it's all very muddled in the Sun Belt.
There's 10 games left, 9 of them in the Sun Belt. To speak to like what they need to do to kind of continue to turn this into a successful season overall, if they just split those, which is what is projected for them right now on KenPom, is that they would go 5-5 the rest of the way, winning the Northern Illinois game in the MAC Challenge in non-com, but going 4-5 in the league the rest of the way. They'd finish 14-17 and 10-8 in the Sun Belt, which certainly a far cry from where they were. And 10-8 probably gets you a top half finish. You know, depending on maybe if there's big tiebreakers, maybe you're like at the 9 seed spot or like the 8, whatever. You've got to continue to. You got to have another 6-3 to really, you know, get to where you might have a winning record. Certainly, that's what you probably need to get to if you're going to try and finish in the top 4. And so, like, you got to keep the pedal down. And even as I think people listening to this are excited about Georgia State in a way that maybe they haven't been for a while, And I hope you are, because it's been a fun team to watch the last 10 games, especially the last 4, the ones they've all been winning, and putting up a bunch of points and shooting a bunch of threes.
Even the 2 losses,
Yeah. I still think there's probably a little bit of trepidation of like, am I buying back in all the way? And the way you lose those fans again is by losing Thursday against Louisiana, which feels like a game now that even if it's coin flippy on the road, you still hope you're going to win. Team that you look at with what they struggle offensively, you hope you can just outscore them, which again is not something we thought we'd be able to say about this team specifically at a lot of points during this season. But they're shooting, Georgia State that is, shooting 37% from 3 in Sunbelt games, top 3. They're number 1 in the conference, top 10 nationally in free throw percentage, and that travels. You can bring that on the road with you, no sweat. And then Saturday's a weird one because South Alabama makes teams attempt a lot of threes because they run some funky zones. It's not like the Rod Hunter thing because they mix them up a bunch, but they want you to take bad percentage shots from 3. So it's a team that forces turnovers in their zone. It's a team that they're 14-6. They are 5-3 in the league. So it's the type of road win that would certainly signal a lot if you're able to get it done. But the worry for me is this feels like the type of, like, if this team falls into some of the bad habits that they had during earlier parts of the season, they could get into a hole in this one because this is a team that is almost like designed to give them fits and force them into doing the things that they have gotten out of the habit of doing as they've been winning games. And so it's on the road. It's kind of a weird matchup, and so I don't have alarm bells up. I don't really know how to, like, I look at it as it would surprise me if they're able to win that one just because of the way it presents itself, but it would be a very encouraging win, and the style they would have to do to win that game if they're able to keep in their offensive flow, run with the 3 guards, running things and taking the right shots rather than forcing the bad looks early in the shot clock and just taking what seems to be there, but that is really what South Alabama is giving them. So it's certainly one that'll be interesting to follow as far as, like, I don't want to keep just, like, backpedaling and being like, I don't believe in this team, but, like,
no, I mean,
it's another test where after the Arkansas State game, they passed that test in the end. And this is just going to be another one where it's like, you're still grading on, like, is this team capable of playing at the top of the Sun Belt? And more than any game other than maybe Arkansas State so far, I feel like this is that opportunity for them on the road. It's not the best team in the league. I still think that's probably Troy. But it's just the way this sets up and it being on the road feels like an important game to just kind of show what they've got. Because it could easily be a type of game where we come back and it's like, well, we have seen that before. And it wouldn't necessarily mean that they've fallen off the wagon and they're in trouble, but it would just, I worry the way that one sets up of what it could look like if it goes poorly. And if they aren't.
And Georgia State has had some weird games versus South Alabama in the recent past. I don't know what it is about Mobile, but Georgia State, football, basketball, women's basketball, it doesn't matter. Just a weird place for the Panthers to play. And I totally understand the trepidation only because at the end of the day, they're 9-12 right now, but this was still a 1-9 team. You know what I mean? Like, it's great that they've gone 8-3 in, that stretch. But they still, you can't be 9-12 without going 1-9 or whatever I usually say, my, ridiculous things there. So I totally understand it. But the other thing, too, is imagine what it looks like if they are able to go 2-0, and then that next game is against Troy next week. Like, that would be very good.
That's appointment television in the Sun Belt. Like, that is...
Yeah, exactly.
All the, Mid-Major Madness is tweeting about that game. Rocco Miller's tweeting about that game. It's not getting flexed or anything. It'll still be ESPN+. But, like, if you've got a ticket to that one, that's the one you got to show up. That would be literally, you'd have the opportunity to get back to 500 with that win. Almost feels like a storybook type situation. Not a storybook ending because it's not the end of the year, but it's kind of like the last kind of part of this complete redemption arc that this team has undergone. And so, going to be burning the midnight oil. If you're tuning in this week, because these are both 8 p.m. starts. Blame David and his Central Time for that, because these are both Central Time games, so it's 7 local. But Georgia State's at 8 at Louisiana on Thursday night. They are 8 p.m. in Mobile on Saturday night. Going gonna be an interesting week for both basketball teams. Obviously, more to track with the football stuff. The players both here and the ones that are in the draft process. A lot more to get to as we head into fully the month of February, the next time we are hitting the podcast mics. But for this episode, for David, for myself, thank you for listening to the Thursday Night Podcast, and we will catch you next time.